The time being 7 o'clock, we will call the Hastings City Council meeting to order. Welcome all. If you'd please stand and state the Pledge of Allegiance. Let the roll reflect that all council are present and a quorum is established. Council members, are there any corrections to the September 9th meeting? If none, seeing none, they are approved. Comments from the audience at this point, anybody willing to or wishing to speak something other than what's on the consent agenda or on the agenda itself may speak now. You may speak now. Okay. Council items to be considered. Council, are there any items to be considered? Okay. Seeing none. Consent agenda. Council, I will accept a motion to accept the consent agenda as is. Councilmember Brox and Councilmember Leifeld. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? That passes. Okay, tonight we have a presentation for a Type 2 home occupant permit. This is not a public hearing. A public hearing was already established with the Planning Commission last week. John, welcome to the meeting.
Thank you, Mayor and City Council members. So tonight, I'll give a recap of the request before us for a Type 2 home occupation, go through some detail of the application itself, some items related to the ordinance, and then the review before the Planning Commission. So what we're looking at tonight involves 201 East 7th Street, which is better known as the former Couturier Smith Funeral Home on the northeast corner of 7th and Sibley Street. This is a home that was built in the late 1950s, about 7,300 square feet, and was used until just recently as a funeral home. The property is owned by Qatar Investments, Jesse Starks is chiefly involved in that. As you know, this funeral home operations was transferred over to a new facility on Vermilion Street. Property is for sale. Dean Marcuson and Shirley Marcuson are looking to purchase the property, and as part of the purchase of the property, have applied for what we call a Type 2 home occupation permit, which allows them to do a home occupation in the property, which I'll get into some detail here. In general, what they're looking to do is to live in the home and then to operate part of the operation, which would be a community gathering space, community center type of space in what was formerly space held by funerals, and then to have a museum and library within it. It would be operated as what the Marcuses are terming the Foss and Swanson Veterans Nonprofit IRS organization. So what they're asking you to do tonight is to operate this home occupation within this building itself. Now, we did take this before the Planning Commission last week. The Planning Commission held a public hearing. We did notify people within 350 feet of the property. During that time, we had about 7 people come to the meeting to speak on the application itself. I think in general, the people that spoke had questions and were generally opposed to the issuance of the home occupation permit. They cited concerns about the community center operation, including service of liquor, hours of operation, parking, potential service to homelessness, and negative impacts to the neighborhood. So those were items that were put into the record during the testimony at the Planning Commission meeting itself. The Planning Commission did review that, the report given to them by staff, and ultimately made a recommendation to deny the home occupation permit, or to recommend denial of the home occupation permit on a 7-0 vote. And so we have their recommendation for denial in the form of a resolution before you tonight. So when we take a look at the home occupation, let's take a look at the setting a little bit here. Here's the home. I think you're all familiar with that. Front of the home here. It's a walkout rambler, so you've got a rear area here in which operations would occur as well. Layout of the site what they're proposing is, when you look at the east side of the site, probably easier here, this is more the residential end of it, and towards the west side would be the commercial end of it itself. So the first floor would be residential unit. This would be the community center or community gathering space on the first floor here. As you look down towards the basement area, there'd be a museum library down in this area here, which would have access through this garage area. There would be need to be some revisions made to that upon any approval that would be granted, and then more of the residential area to the west, some parking down in this area as well. So that would be what they would be proposing generally for the use of the property itself. When we take a look at the zoning, zoning is R2, which is a residential zoning district. The funeral home and its operation was an anomaly there for many years. It predated the issuance, or predated the establishment of zoning in that area. It was what we called a non-conforming use during most of its lifetime, which meant it wouldn't be allowed today, but it's there. It can continue to operate, provided it does not get any larger or more intense within the district. So it operated there for many, many years. Now with the property today, it's a little bit different. They're looking to operate this, they're looking to have this as their primary residence, so this would be a home in which they would live in. However, it is a quite large building, and so the operation for the home occupation would occur also within the facility itself. Home occupations are a permitted use within the R2 zoning district. In general terms, we have type 1 occupations, which can be done without a permit. These are things that are essentially invisible to the public. If you're an accountant running your accountant business out of your home, no one sees any operations, there's no customers, no effects, that's fine. We have a type 2 home occupation in which some occupations are going to have an effect in which they're going to be more noticed by the neighborhood because of the number of customers they draw, use of portions of the facility, those type of measurements. In those instances, we do have the public hearing, planning commission review, and city council review on those. When we look at the home occupation provisions, essentially what we're looking at is trying to find a way in which a home occupation can operate and not be any more intensive or a disruption to the neighborhood. When you look at the ordinance provisions itself, it states that there can't be any exterior alterations or modifications to the structure, no exterior display or storage of equipment, no indication of offensive noise, vibration, smoke, or dust. Everything has to be conducted indoors. It can't jeopardize the public health and safety. You can't have shipment of products and merchandise between 8 a.m. or shipment and delivery of products is limited to between 8 a.m. and 6 p.m. A home occupation cannot cause additional parking or traffic between the hours of 8 p.m. and 7 a.m. So there can't be any additional traffic past 8 p.m. at night. Only articles or services made or originating on the premises can be sold there unless it's an incidental item. Limited to one vehicle to be used, and signage is also limited. So all of these regulations are there in order to ensure that the operation of the home occupation is in keeping with the residential nature of the neighborhood itself. So when we take a look at what the Markisons are proposing, they're proposing the Fossen Swatson Veterans Nonprofit Organization, including a museum, library, and this community center, community gathering center. What I've been told by them and what is on the application is that it would function similar to a VFW or a Legion Hall. It would hold approximately 150 people, be rented out to organizations which may have food and alcohol catered in, but there would not be any gambling on the premises. The people involved in this must be the people who live in the home, and that would be the case here, which would be Dean and Shirley Markison. However, there would be community service volunteers, curator, historical research, etc., that would be involved in it as well. Hours of operation stated by Mr. Markison would be 1 p.m. to 8 p.m. on the application. There are some parking spaces within the site, but certainly when you take a look at what the site would need for a funeral home and or this type of facility, it does not meet parking requirements. However, since the funeral home was established prior to zoning requirements, it's grandfathered in not meeting parking. And when you take a look at how parking is generated and how we evaluate how much parking is needed, both are termed assembly spaces. What Mr. Markison would be doing in the funeral home So we would look at the parking generation as being similar, so it would be grandfathered in its current situation. There would be some interior alterations to the main floor restrooms, interior walls. There would be maybe catering of community center events that may involve alcohol service as well within the property. And there has been some discussion about homeless services or ancillary services to the homeless. In further discussions with Mr. Marcuson, it sounds like that would not occur, but that something that has been in discussion in the past. So when we take a look at the project itself, we had the Planning Commission review, we had the public testimony from the public as well, and ultimately a recommendation for denial by the Planning Commission itself. So what we have before you tonight is that recommendation. We have within the report itself, when you take a look at the Planning Commission, if the City Council does opt to approve the home occupation permit, staff would suggest those conditions be added in any motion of approval, which would limit some of the operations of the building itself. In taking a look at a potential approval for this, what we're looking at is trying to not exceed the scope of the operation from the former Couturier Smith funeral home there. In talking to the owners of the funeral home, it appeared that the number of attendees that they would have for a visitation or service would be between maybe 125 to 150 for a funeral, 200 for a visitation, and there were approximately 140 events per year. So that's kind of the baseline that we would use to determine if this would be more intensive from a use standpoint there. So that is all I have for your consideration here. Again, the resolution in the report is for denial per the Planning Commission recommendation. And Mr. Dean Marcuson is here, the applicant, if you have any questions for him. And I can stand for any questions as well. Thank you.
Thank you, John. So in the audience, I see people that are from the neighborhood that we also saw at the Planning Commission. If there is any other additional information, we all saw the Planning Commission notes. If there's any additional information you'd like to step up here and tell us, you can do so now. Please state your name and your address.
Maybe won't you let the applicant go first?
Dean, go first.
Okay, sorry, I guess we're gonna have Dean go first,
Okay.
if he wishes to speak. Dean, would you like to say a few words? Welcome, Dean.
I'm Dean Marcuson, the Chief Executive Officer of Foss and Swanson Veterans. And I reside at 436 Tiffany Drive, Hastings, Minnesota, 55033. As I said at the Planning Commission, I will abide by every rule in the home occupation permit. I will abide. As was emphasized, we are not a community center. We are a community gathering place where the community can get together and talk, share, anything you want to talk about. Yes, I do have a passion for veterans. And the military, and the families, and the children. That's my passion. It's been there for 10 years, and the superintendent can vouch for me that, of what I really care about the kids. They are the most important asset in this community. We have to take care of them. But it's not going to be assembly place for the children because the school takes care of that through the military support group. And they're doing a fine and outstanding job and commendable. Because I had one of the military spouse come to me and say, Dean, the Hastings Public School is the best in the state of Minnesota in caring for the children. And that's my goal because my heart is there. The one thing, there will not be too many events and activities in that facility. Why? Because I work with the community in going to them, and the events and activities are held at their place. Like the last one we just had was at the YMCA. It was a beautiful event, and we got another event planned at the YMCA because we're bringing in a lot of the specialists talking about holistic healing. We're going to talk about employment, benefits, anything that the veteran and military and family needs. I'm charged with that. And the key thing, I don't do the work. I refer them to the agencies that will do it, like the County Veteran Service Officer, the VA, MACV, anybody who serves the veteran. That's who does the work. I just refer. Once in a while I get in there to clarify what their needs are because I feel that's my place to sit down with the people, learn about the person, and do the whole person aspect, not just take one little portion of it. It's the whole person that we serve, not just a hand. So that's all I got to say, I think. Past Commander Joe knows me. Councilmember Vaughn, he came to one of my meetings. He was a little critical about what I was doing. He said, why can't you do it like Burnsville does it? Well, we work together with all the communities in Dakota County, and Farmington was #1, but in my days, in my books, Rosemont is #1 in the state in caring for veterans because they step out on the limb for them. And Carl's a good man. We got another person that is a real good man. That's called the Hiawatha Valley. Well, me and Lance, we work together. We serve and help each other. And he goes all the way to Winona, Minnesota. So it's about collaboration. It's not me or I, it's us and we. Thank you. Any questions?
Councilmember Vaughn?
Thank you, Your Honor. Dean, thank you. I just got the services that you want to provide out of this facility. Are they duplicating what the VFW does today, the American Legion, or even the Vets Home? Do you see any duplication of
We do
services?
not duplicate any services of the VFW, the American Legion, and the AMVETS, and the DEAV, the Vietnam Veterans of America. We work together because if they get a call, if they need help, they call me, or they'll handle it on their own. A lot of the experiences with the American Legion is a person comes in there and has a need. Well, a lot of people in the American Legion doesn't have the experience to handle the case. So they call me. Or Dakota County Technical College calls me, the County Veteran Service Officer calls me, the VA calls me, MACV calls me, and we work together as a team. Like I said, it is about teamwork, not an individual effort. The VFW, we will not duplicate their services because they have one very fine service, and that's called the Rifle Squad and the Memorial Squad. You'll see them at almost every funeral in the city that the family requests, because that's the one provision. The family has to ask for it. And basically, Jesse will call the VFW and make arrangements.
If I could, Your Honor, a follow-up question to that, or clarification, Dean. part of the application process, I've seen you're looking for a community center, but you have clarified you're looking for a community gathering place. That's my one hangup is I've been to the Legion, and there is a gathering place for the community there. I don't know about the Vets Home. I think the VFW moving to their new location, that's why I asked the question, is there any duplication of services in the application that you have for this piece of property that we already have in the community? That's what the clarification I wanted on that.
The clarification, I do not duplicate the services. We work together as a team.
Thank you.
Councilmember Fulch?
Thank you, Your Honor. Thank you, Dean.
You're welcome.
You always have such a pleasant smile. I'm glad to see you. I had questions about your business model then. So if you were going to have a community center or going to have a gathering place, so are you envisioning that it's, you're going to rent the space for individuals to come in and then you would provide food and drink? Or would they be able to cater in events like you would? Just kind of what were you thinking a little bit more about the community gathering place?
There will be no rentals in that facility for a permanent location. You know, like downtown, they rent the building. There will be none of that. Basically, okay, the example I'm thinking, the brand new business downtown, Coffee and Pie. Yeah, that's a brand new one. And the smoothie joint down by the American Legion, well, they'll come in and serve the people because we're about serving the people. And they'll come in and, yeah, they'll be caterers, okay? And them two facilities don't serve any alcohol. The majority of my people, the ones I'll bring in, do not serve alcohol. But if you want to have an anniversary, celebrate your 50th, when you get there, you can come in and just like the other facilities, you are responsible for hiring the caterer and making arrangements with them.
Okay, so again, just to reiterate what you said is that you're making the space available for others to use your home and then they would cater in any events that they wanted to.
That's what a gathering place is all about.
Okay.
Dean, excuse me, but could you go to the podium
Oh, excuse me.
and speak through the speakers because we are being televised? Thank you.
Okay, and then on the issue of alcohol, and so, again, to clarify that you would only allow liquor to be brought into your community center if it was catered and then it would be served by a professionally licensed liquor distributor, or I'm not sure who all in town does that kind of work, but.
You're 100% correct, because before anybody comes in there, if you have a caterer, I will ask for their license, and if they're going to serve liquor, I'm going to ask for their license, because I need to verify who's utilizing my space and that they're in accordance with the law of the city.
Okay, great. Thank you, Dean. Thank you, Your Honor.
Council, any other discussion? Any other questions? Okay. Okay. Oh, excuse me, Councilmember Balsonic.
Yes, thank you, Your Honor. Dean, thank you for your service. Thank you for everything that you do for our community.
Can you talk to the microphone?
Are we on? I have my mic on.
Yep.
Okay, I'll get a little closer. Thank you for your service and thank you for everything that you've done for our community. Beyond the yellow ribbon, you've had a tremendous influence on the children of vets, relatives of vets in our school system. You've served on many committees at the American Legion, and you're a real credit to our community. I really want to thank you for all that, and probably more that I haven't even mentioned. Are you going to be officially affiliated with any kind of organization, or is this going to be strictly you as a private citizen?
As I said, I will be affiliated with any organization that serves people,
Well, okay, and I
like
appreciate,
the VA, MACV,
yeah.
the County Veteran Service Officer, MACV, MACV, they handle the legal problems. They handle the legal problems because they go there and the Minneapolis VA Center every month holds a meeting where the veteran can go there if he's contemplating divorce or having any property. Any legal problem will be handled them for free.
You have been referring to serving the people. Just so that we're clear, your primary serving is going to be for veterans or family members of veterans?
I'll give you a situation I'm involved today. I have a non-veteran living outside of the historical district that the city said, clean your place up. And next door is a veteran with 20 years of service that might die tomorrow. Well, I've dedicated the economic impact that I and some of my friends in the community have given so far is equal to over $8,000 economic impact to clean that place. I still got a lot of work to do, but it will be one of the best properties in that area when I get done.
Another question. Okay, as John Hensman had pointed out, we've had a funeral home there, and there have been 100 to 150 people, I think you said. That's kind of the norm that we have set in terms of, what can happen with Dean's property if indeed we were to approve it. The thing about the funeral industry is that there's a bit of regimentation. The neighborhood knows by reading in the paper, hearing from neighbors, that, okay, there's going to be a wake. The wake is usually, 3 to 7 or something like that. It's a rather regimented field in terms of what the neighborhood can expect from a funeral home. Now, and it was about 150 events a year, John, you said?
Councilmember, I think what I had from the funeral operator was about 140 events a year, between 125 to 150, I think, for a funeral and 200 for a visitation, or that might be maybe transposed, but
Okay.
those numbers.
Well, with that, I guess the point I'm trying to make is that with a funeral operation, there's an expectation on the part of the neighbors as to what is going to be going on. And so with that, things sort of fit into the neighborhood as a result of that.
I'd like to clarify that.
Well,
Excuse me, I'm
But,
sorry.
yeah, just to finish, and so with that kind of regimentation of the visitations and, what is expected of that kind of a business, I think what I'm hearing from you is that this will be going on 365 days of the year, that there'll be parking and people coming and going and so forth. it doesn't sound very regimented to me. And what I'm asking you is, can you tell me and the neighborhood that there will be some rigidity, some regimentation as to how you are going to operate what you intend to do?
Councilmember Joe, I'm going to refer to you when you were the commander of the American Legion. You held Memorial Day, you held Veterans Day, and some special events in the American Legion, because that's the mission of the American Legion. And you can answer that question better than me. How many events did the Legion host throughout the year? It's been a rather increase recently, because the cruise in, they had the American Legion sponsored a reunion, a homecoming for a particular event unit from Wisconsin. It was a great celebration. You can ask anybody in the community what it was all about. There's a lot of other things that the American Legion does in their location. But the events aren't that frequent. I'm not going to be like the American Legion and their back room. In fact, you can vouch for how many were in there. It holds up to 100 squeezing.
About 95 is
Yeah,
what the
right.
fire marshal tells us, yes.
So therefore, the American Legion, the VFW, goes out in the community, such as utilizing the armory, utilizing country inns, using the funeral home, because I think, I'll impose upon Jesse, how many events do you hold other than funerals?
Probably 10 to 12 a year. And I can speak to that if I have a chance to.
Sure. Thank you, Jess. So it's not your intention to hold official gatherings twice or three times a week, but there will be people coming and going to be seeking services, or, as you say, a community gathering. There could be a half dozen, a dozen, maybe 20, maybe up to 150, if that's what the building does hold. So I'm just trying to wrap myself around what the daily operations are going to be there. I would assume there might be an anniversary party for a couple, might be a wedding reception, a birthday party, retirement, so on and so forth. And again, I'm just trying to see, how does this fit from what historically has been going on in the neighborhood? Now,
Well, I'd have to say, number one, I'm not going to be like the High Ground in Eadsville, Wisconsin, or the Soldiers Walk down in where they make all that good furniture. I'm not going to be one of them. I'll be probably like the small place in Red Wing, just a small shop. They're only open on Fridays and Saturdays. And then you can go to Cannon Falls. They're only open by appointment. And then you can go to the Old Horse that just got recognized, and they don't have that many people visit, except when they have an open house and the whole community comes in to see what they're doing, because them are fine organizations. The Old Horse is about holistic healing for horses, okay?
Again, thanks. It's just, again, I'm trying to wrap myself around what the buzz is going to be on that property. We've got a school, two schools actually, pretty close to this location. But a school, again, we know their business, their hours of operation. The buses show up, the kids walk in, now things settle down, there is recess, school is over. Everybody in the neighborhood is aware of how that
Okay,
operates.
by the ordinance that established, if you want to hold a wedding anniversary with your wife, you'll be out at 8 o'clock.
Which I saw on here.
Yeah.
You intend to have everything
Right?
done by
We'll
8.
be out by 8 o'clock. I will turn the key.
Well, my wife and I just celebrated our 50th anniversary
Congratulations.
back in April, and I'm not sure we would want to go out the door at 8 o'clock.
Well,
With
the
them.
neighbors
Just kidding.
say, that's what the ordinance says. I will abide by the ordinance.
Right, right. One last question. Because I'm trying to establish that we don't have any fake news in Hastings, but there was an article in the Star-Gazette this past week indicating that the Planning Commission had voted to not approve. And there was an interview where you were quoted as saying that you were now looking for other locations. So if this were to not go through, is there another location or locations that could be appropriate, or maybe more appropriate than what we have here?
There is no other location in consideration because I talked to the community and, well, they stirred me in the right way. Dean, you don't have to go to Wisconsin. We want you to stay in Hastings. And then, well, you heard about what happened to Country Nights. Well, they're totally remodeling that place. And there's other places that are not suitable for it because, just like the ordinance says, I was considering Nittinger Township, but wouldn't be suitable to go out there. I've listened to our ministers and the whole entire community really to give me some advice because I've never been a businessman in my life, and I think I'm doing halfway good job because I listen and learn from the community. And they teach me how to run an efficient operating business. Just like, what is Hastings all about? It's going to be a good place to live, work, play, start a business, and retire. That's what Hastings is all about. Just like Washington County.
Yeah, a question. Did John leave the room?
He unfortunately had to
Okay,
leave.
maybe Dan could answer this. Property is zoned R2, grandfathered in for a funeral home. Could another funeral home purchase that property and operate it? Or are we done with funeral homes in that R2 property?
Councilmember, a non-conforming use like that, if it's discontinued for a specified amount of time, it loses its non-conforming status. There's a couple different time periods in the code, so I don't want to commit to exactly what that time would be. It would be somewhere between, I think it could be as short as, the longest it would be 1 year. So if a funeral home was discontinued in that location for more than 1 year, I think the property lost its non-conforming status and would not be able to continue. Structures are dealt with a little different than operations, so I'm going to be a little, non-committal there, but I think a funeral home probably would not be allowed in there. It would have to request a rezone unless funeral homes are allowed in the district.
Okay, so actually, not only a funeral home, but really any other kind of a business that would want to establish itself there on that property would not be allowed? Then, I mean, we're R2, we are R2. And I'm ill at ease about granting something when we really are R2. It concerns me in terms of the precedent it might set for other areas of the city in terms of zoning.
You're correct, council member. R2 zone does not allow many commercial type uses. It did allow, I believe churches are allowed in there, which are kind of a little different animal. But yes, if they're not zoned there and they're not allowed as a conditional use or special use, then they are effectively prohibited. And really the only way to allow that there would be through a rezone of the property, which may be difficult to do if it would be a spot zone.
And that's my hang-up. I know what you're doing is a worthy effort, and I applaud you for stepping away from beyond the yellow ribbon, retiring from that entity, and I think within 24 hours turning around and now picking up the banner for something like this. We need this for veterans. I served 22 years in the Air Force. My experience led to things that enhanced my life. Unfortunately, we have veterans whose experiences have taken them the opposite way, and in many cases to the most extreme opposite way. So whatever we can do for our veterans, I feel is paramount on that. You put a person into a wartime situation, even for 6 months, 2 years of duty, whatever, they come back out, and now they're supposed to be changing diapers and helping their children with schoolwork and things like that. It is not an easy transformation. It is not. So I really do commend you for what you are trying to do. My concern, again, is that we are zone R2. And the expectations of that neighborhood are to keep it R2. Thank you, Your Honor.
I got one thing to add to that, Councilmember Joe. I had the opportunity, Wednesday, to meet Air Force Brett, okay? Her father died, and she did a pencil sketching of her stone. She saw what the community was doing to honor the Fosses and the Swansons, so she made a pencil sketching of their gravestones and the image of Foss. Now that's a dedicated brat, okay? My kids love to be called brats.
Right.
The key thing, the community is charged with the mission to take care of all the citizens, okay? Before, during, and after. They're charged with it. It's not my responsibility, it's yours.
Councilmember Leifeld?
Thank you, Your Honor. This might be something Mr. Flegel can answer for me. First question, actually, two parts. One is, so if the home occupation permit were granted, does that follow the home or does it end with the homeowner?
Councilmember, it would stay with the applicant. It's not like a conditional use permit that would run with the property. It's limited to the applicant.
Okay, so 2 years, 5 years, 30 years, the Markson sell that property, that home occupation permit is null and void.
That's correct.
Okay. Second part of that would be, everything that I read regarding the home occupation permit was, I didn't see anything about alcohol sales. That's throwing me off a bit. Yeah, the sales word tricks me a bit. And I'd like some clarification, and I know John is not able to be here at the moment to answer this, but I need some more clarification on the sales. I understand that you're not going to sell alcohol, but if someone has a birthday party, an anniversary party, and they bring in a caterer who is selling that alcohol, that as a home occupation permit, I'd be curious to know where that lies.
I'll do my best there, Councilmember. There's nothing in the home occupation ordinance that expressly allows sales of alcohol in a home occupation.
So, I've been at events, I worked for some time for Green Mill in their catering department, and there were some locations we could sell the alcohol, and there were some locations where it had to be purchased by the individual holding the event, and it was then given to the attendees of the event. So I'm curious to know if that is what you're looking at doing here. I mean, I don't feel comfortable with the idea of events selling alcohol out of, I guess I'm a little confused as to.
Number one, I will sell no alcohol.
You've indicated you won't.
No cigarettes, no chewing tobacco, anything that is bad for the health.
So if someone,
Personal decision.
so if someone wanted to have an event in your community center, are you saying you wouldn't allow them to serve alcohol in the community center?
They will, okay, they are, let's see, by contract, using my facility, and it will be in accordance with established rules, which I will work with the city, what shall be done in that place. It's going to be a collaborative effort between me and you, what the rules and procedures should be. I know the city attorney will tell me, well, Dean, you might need an attorney for that. I'll have to go out and hire one because he can't help me because he has his job as a city attorney is take care of the city. Okay? He cannot tell me anything or even do anything for me. Just like the Dakota County attorney who I saw today, I said, those same remarks. Well, his remarks were, ha, 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 ha. You know, because I worked with the Dakota County attorney on several things, and they've said the same thing. The city attorney told me, I'm sorry, that's a conflict of interest. Go hire an attorney.
Just to clarify what Councilmember Liefeld said, I'm reading right here, the proposed home occupation, Fawcett Swanson Veterans Nonprofit IRS Organization. This was a questionnaire that was filled out by the applicant. Uses a museum, community center, would function similar to VFW or Legion Hall, hold approximately 150 people and be rented out to organizations which may have food and alcohol catered in. But now you're saying you're not going to allow this. Now I'm assuming you're the one that answered this questionnaire, right? Is that correct? So I'm getting a conflict here, and I think, Council Member, you raised a very important point on that. Whether it's sold or whether it is given as part of the catering. I know, you know, some events, drinks are on the house. Some events, it's an open bar. And some events, it's just a glass of champagne, and that's it for the night. So we're seeing something nebulous here. And I would like to see some clarification on it. Thank you. I didn't mean to interrupt, but thank you, Your Honor.
Councilmember Fulch.
Thank you, Your Honor. Dean, I have a quick question for you, and then if it's okay, if it pleases our mayor, if we could hear from Jesse Starkson as well, I'd be interested in hearing about some of the details of his operation. Dean, I would like to know, if we were to grant you the type 2 home occupation permit, I hear you being very flexible. I hear you saying, I'll do what the city tells me to do. And so we appreciate your willingness to be flexible and work with us, because I know you're made of gold. So I'm gonna ask you this. I'm gonna ask you, because we heard John Hinsman, our planning director, he said to us, okay, well, if we did pass this, we should put requirements, the limitations of your business at this establishment. And so, Dean, are you okay with us? I mean, if we grant this, not allowing alcohol to be served on the premise, because I think that that's one issue that's hanging us up a little bit. And then if we were to limit the hours of operation to be and the number of folks that come on in to be the same as what the funeral home, because I'd like to hear from Mr. Starkson if they had allowed alcohol. And then visitations are kind of unique, where a lot of people are coming and going, and so I can see where that would have maybe too high of a limit. But for more of a, like a sit-down kind of gathering where folks came in, just to know what those limits might be. And John was throwing out their numbers kind of fast, but I heard about 140 maybe, or 150 or something like that. And so would you be comfortable in not serving alcohol and limiting hours to being that of what the funeral home had been, and then limiting the number of occupancies?
As I said, when I first started, I will comply whatever the city tells me to. Let me give you an example.
No.
I'm a nonprofit, therefore, I'm required to file income tax returns. I'm required yearly to file with the Secretary of State. And if I don't comply, they're going to take away my nonprofit status, and they're going to take away my permission to operate in the state of Minnesota, just like the IRS will do if I don't comply with the law.
Okay.
And that, that's an example. I have to comply to a higher authority than the city.
Okay, thank you. That was my question. Could we hear from Mr. Starkson as well?
Is that it for us? Okay. Jesse, would you mind stepping up to the podium? Thank you, Dean.
You're welcome, Mayor. Nice seeing you again.
Thanks, Jesse.
Good evening, Mayor Fassbender and council. So I'm happy to help answer any of the questions that have been previously held at our facility, and I know Bob Couturier is here as well. His family established this location in the late 1958 when that property was owned by the city of Hastings, and had asked their family to develop this business within the neighborhood that it's in when that neighborhood was in force. For nearly 61 years, we've held multiple events, obviously less back when the community was the size that it was. And the reason that we've reestablished and invested in the future of this community is because of the increase of the amount of funerals, the amount of residents, and specifically the requests of the community and needing the space for continual gathering areas. So kind of bouncing around, and again, I'm happy to answer any of those questions, but Councilmember Leifeld, up until we moved out in the end of April of 2019, we were hosting funerals at the location on 7th Street. With the alcohol portion of things, we were serving alcohol, which is legal, and that was done through a caterer that holds an alcohol license. They carry the insurance. Those fees are paid for by the person renting our facility for those that are in attendance. And from visiting with Dean Markuson, I envision that that's the same thing that he would be doing. There would not be alcohol sales strictly from the Markusons or Foss and Swanson, as that is a whole nother type of approach for licensing, as we all know. So I stand before you, I stand in front of those that are here in attendance from our neighborhood. Nothing is changing that was happening inside of the building. People were gathering for funerals, but people were also gathering for outside events other than funerals, okay? We held community groups, we held grief support groups, we held speaking seminars, we held anything that anybody ever wanted. We wanted to be a place for people to become safe, people to feel welcomed, and offered the same services that the proposed applicant is asking for that neighborhood.
Okay.
And kind of going over, unfortunately, I was out of town last weekend, so I apologize for any of those that had questions in specific reference to our operation. I can confirm that we do 120 to 140 funerals a year. I know the question was brought up that they thought that there was only 3 or 4 events there a month. I'm happy to prove that that is not correct. And I also want to make sure to clarify that I stand here as the owner of 201 East 7th Street, that the Regan family has nothing to do as far as ownership for my building. I know that that was also portrayed. I think it's important that as we think about this, that we incorporate all aspects, both the applicant and the history of the facility and how it currently stands.
Thank you, Jesse. Councilmember Vaughn?
Thank you, Your Honor. This might be for our legal counsel. If you could answer this, Dan, could the current owner of the building, the Starkson family, operate this business model in that building today without coming before us? Could they be the owner of this same business model with that building today?
Councilmember, no. This would be a home occupation, so the one primary requirement is that the operator reside in the property. So I don't think that would be met as a starting point. So I think without that, you wouldn't have it.
Okay, thank you.
And if I can interject for the question, and I forget who brought up as far as if it could be sold to another funeral home. I think that was you, Councilmember Liefeld. It was, okay, sorry about that. So the way it's written within the purchase agreement, and it would be written on the deed, that if we sell it to another party, that it's not able to be a funeral home for 30 years. So I'm putting that restriction on, obviously, the sale of the property. So no, that's not a consideration for moving forward with it.
No competition.
What's that?
No competition.
Well, obviously for multiple reasons, and that probably is one.
Councilmember Lund?
Thank you, Your Honor. Councilmember Vaughn asked a question, and I'll just ask a slight variation of it. So if it weren't in addition to the gathering space and so forth, a residence, would they be able to operate this type of business model? So I don't hear a lot of complaints about someone living there per se, but the other activities. So I guess that's my variation of the question.
I'll do my best again here, Councilmember. I think if what you're asking about is placing, using a museum-type use, displaying artifacts, I mean, an individual could do that in their home, and I don't think that there's any restriction or regulation that would prohibit that. When it becomes something where outdoor employees or staff are coming in and there's going to be parking associated like that, or if there would be entry fees charged, I think that would probably be prohibited under the R2 district. So I'm not sure I'm getting your question correct, but I think you were suggesting exclude the gathering space uses, or are you talking that as well?
Thank you, Your Honor. In this Your Honor, is it even on? Okay, in this hypothetical, everything is included except for the residence. And let's just say current property owner changes business model to be the proposed business model in front of us. Would there be an issue there?
I would say that would be allowed. It's not something that's contemplated in the R2 district. I don't think those uses would be allowed. The way that this application has come in is as a home occupation permit, which allows some flexibility to the primary residential use in the area, and that's intended to be done when there's only going to be a relatively low impact on the neighboring properties. So I would say no, these uses could not be allowed without that home occupation permit.
Councilmember Brox?
Thank you, Your Honor. I guess the The primary question for me is, we've asked a lot of questions about a lot of different details. And in some ways, I don't think that it's our responsibility to dictate what this property has on it and the way the business is run. But I think we do have an opportunity, because the owner is changing, to exert the original plan for the neighborhood that we saw, which was that this was a residential neighborhood. So I think a lot of our questions are we're trying to understand and envision what it is that Dean has envisioned, because when I hear a community gathering space or support groups meeting, to me, that doesn't sound like the volume of people nor the intensity of use that this facility has already had. Because there's been 150 people showing up 3 or 4 times a week for however long that's been. That's a pretty intense use, in my opinion. So a handful of people coming to see a museum or a group gathering for grief support, I just don't envision the use of this facility as intense as we're making it out to be, or it could be. Like, the potential is there, but there's nothing that I've heard that would help me kind of understand what the vision for this property really is, that it's going to be that big of a use or that intense of a use. So I think with a lot of the details aside, I think the primary issue for the city council and the thing we should be focusing on is this use something that is going to intensify this use for this neighborhood, cause more traffic, cause more parking problems? Is there any public safety issues? I think that's where we need to focus, because it's the owner and the purchaser's responsibility to make sure that the purchase is done in a way that is legal, that the uses on the property are legal. And I appreciate all the questions, but I also think we need to focus on the main issue, which is, does this intensify the zoning use or not? And that's the question we need to answer and vote on, as opposed to some of these other things.
And one last.
Councilmember Vaughn.
Thank you, Your Honor, and thank you, Councilmember Brock, because it's a good reminder for our role here. I go back to any time we get a home occupation application in front of us, it's in a neighborhood traditionally, type 1, type 2. I try to break it down as simple as there's three reasons we do that. It's a small business, they got a potential to grow and maybe get into a commercial, and it's good for the community. It's good for the whole community. Or it's just a good small business owner that's able to be a resident of this community, and we all benefit from having good residents. But the biggest one is to be a good neighbor. Take all the business aside, do we have good neighbors? And is this going to be good for the neighborhood? And that's why I go back to the zoning of R2. The reason I was asking that question to the legal is, what if he rented it? I mean, now we're going to get into details of renting versus home occupation. Do you have to own the home? What if the Markelsons rented it from the current ownership? Could they run this same operation? And we'll find out. That's why I get hung up on the detail part of it, where I think we had to ask those questions, because I think the community, the residents are asking these questions, saying, if this was in our neighborhood, I'd be asking these questions, saying, what's the traffic count? What's this all going to do? It's too vague for me right now. We don't have any detail in that application, and I think that's what we got to focus on, what's in front of us too, that the detail's not there yet to say, this is what I'm going to do and how I'm going to do it. I go back to the 3 points, and are they going to be a good neighbor? Right now, the neighbors are what we hear. And again, did they get the proper information? Did they read what we're reading? They got more questions too. That's where I'm a little, it all goes down to being a good neighbor. And traditionally, when we do home occupation, you better make sure the neighbors are in agreement with you. It helps it a lot easier versus putting us in between it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Vaughn. Any other discussion, Council?
Can I add just a little more? And John obviously isn't here to, I guess, back me on this, but we have invited the fire department through and during this application, and the fire department did approve the space for the capacity that's being requested at 150. Mr. Markuson does just have to add some exit signs, some, more safety, minor hazards that are obviously obsolete in an old building like that. So those memos, I think, just again, kind of portraying that to those that are here from the neighborhood, understanding that obviously others, officials have looked at the opportunity there as well. So.
Thank you, Jesse. Councilmember Balsonic.
Thank you, Your Honor. To echo what Councilmember Brock has just brought up and Councilmember Vaughn, and listening over the past few minutes. I hope I don't sound repetitious, but its form, what is the form of the function? The form has to fit the function. If you have a school, there's form to the function, okay? You've got buses coming in, coming out, you got parents dropping kids off, picking them up, faculty coming in and out. There's form to that function. If you have a church in a neighborhood, you have form with the function. If you have a funeral home, you've got form with the function. And I am having a hard time, as enthusiastic as Mr. Markinson is, I would like to see a better form to the function before I would wholeheartedly vote for this. But in the meantime, again, I'm going back to the R2 function. That's what the neighborhood should be. And I think it's important not only for this neighborhood, but I think it's important for other neighborhoods within our city that we keep stability with our zoning. I think that's really paramount. That's why we have zoning. And this particular idea is a good idea, like I said earlier, but it might be better to have it be occupied or to occupy another location. Maybe there's going to be a guest speaker and there might be admission charge. You were asked, council member, you were asking about admission charge to the museum. If there's a guest speaker, is there a charge? What types of things are going on? And again, looking at that model, I'm not seeing a lot of form to the function. If I saw more form to it, I might be more inclined to be wholeheartedly behind it. In concept, I'm behind it, but I don't see it fitting in here. And again, going back to the zoning. Thank you, Your Honor.
Councilmember Fulch.
Thank you, Your Honor. Well, I'm inclined to actually to be supportive of the type 2 home occupational permit after hearing Dean talk more about it. The fact is this home is 7,300 square feet. Holy Hannah, could you imagine trying to clean that every weekend? Oh my God, you need a maid. And so realistically, you're not going to see a single family go in there, right? And so the fact that Shirley and Dean want to make that primary residence, I think is wonderful. And I think that Dean has told us very clearly that you're willing to be flexible and have limited use of the facility. I would be in favor of, again, the type 2 home occupation permit with some of the limits of operations. Jesse, was it between 1 and 8 were your hours of operation before?
And actually, if I can speak to that comment to Councilmember Bosanic, the funeral home was a 24-hour operation, okay?
It was 24 hours.
We had people coming and going 24 hours a day. That could be families, that could be law enforcement. Before Dakota County's contract with Hennepin County Medical Examiner's Office, those facilities were housed in the basement of that firm for many, many years. And I look at when you say the regular of the funeral, there's nothing regular about the events I was holding. We were meeting families multiple times. Yes, typically visitations are in the evening, typically funerals are in the morning. But that's not a regular occurrence. And I look at the church next door. Church has Sunday services, but does the church do different things throughout the week? Absolutely. Does the school do different things outside a normal bus drop-off and normal pickup? Absolutely. So I just want you guys to think about, yes, it would be great, but also from a financial standpoint, it has to make sense. It would be great to have a brand new building to do these types of services. We have too many vacant buildings in this community that we don't have the ability to fill because it's always being recommended to a different location. And I get that this isn't a neighborhood. We've been a neighbor there for years. I mean, I get that, I respect that. But I would also want you guys to think about the future. And if having that building is sitting empty versus having it occupied by somebody that's giving his life to the neighborhood, to this community, volunteering, doing transportations, doing yard cleanup, I don't understand what the high impact for the neighborhood is going to be.
Council, any other discussion? Okay, thanks,
Thank you.
Jesse. Audience?
Go ahead. My name is Amy Martin. I live at 220 7th Street East, right across from the former Rosewood Inn, the Latto House. My husband, Dudley Parkinson, owns the duplex at 200 and 202 7th Street East. And I have lived in my house for 25 years, and I'm very familiar with the traffic of the funeral home. The new information that I'm bringing to you today is that, I will get to it in just a second. The first that we heard of the proposed use for the funeral home, and actually I'm going to stop and say that we do support veterans too, and thank veterans for their service. This is not about veterans. Pardon me, Jesse? The first that we heard was I had 1 or 2 letters on my door and one stuck under my windshield written by Mr. Markison about the proposed use. And I got a call from my neighbor who said, "Did you get one of these letters?" And I said, "Yes." It was very hard to understand. I'm sure you guys have seen a copy. It was very, very vague. It mentioned a museum, a home occupation, I think it did say home occupation, and a gathering center or community center. It didn't talk about alcohol. It didn't talk about events, and it didn't talk about providing meals and showers for homeless vets, which when we came to the meeting, the Planning Commission meeting last week, Mr. Markison was in the hallway talking to one of the neighbors, telling that that's part of the plan, something we didn't see in writing and had not heard about. And then he said at the meeting that he would not do that. My point being up here right now is that our experience so far has been that boundaries are not recognized, protocols are not followed, and I do believe that you are very committed to veterans and their families and helping them. That is not in question. I do think that, all right, so the new event is that Saturday I was out in my yard and Mr. Markison came to my house to tell me that he was withdrawing his application for this property. And I was a little taken aback because I don't know Mr. Markison outside of the context of this application. But I thanked him for letting me know that, and I wished him the best, sincerely. And I called this morning, I called John Hinsman to make sure that there was no hearing tonight, and he said, no, it actually is on the agenda. So our experience as neighbors has been that boundaries, even to this point of the process, have not been recognized. The normal protocols, I mean, normally, we've had home occupation experiences. I had a home occupation use in my home, a business. There are processes that you go through. You know, you get, John Hinsman sends out a letter. So our fear is that not only our fear is that we don't have enough information, and I'd like to thank Councilmember Vaughn and Councilmember Balsanic for bringing those points up. I really appreciate that. There isn't enough information. When people come to a funeral, you are pretty sure that it's going to be a quiet, orderly experience. We don't have enough information to know what is going to happen at events, particularly events with alcohol. And the 7 days a week of the funeral home still was, normal business hours. If there were things going on where there was business being conducted, where someone was coming in the night, it wasn't disruptive to the neighborhood. The Kachuris were a great neighbor for all the years that we lived there. So that is that is our fear, that there will be, we haven't experienced so far that boundaries have been observed, normal boundaries, or that normal protocols have been followed. And I think this would be a very difficult situation to monitor. If you have, one of the questions that came up was, if you've got guys gathering there and they have the kind of issues where they might need a shower or a meal, are you really going to be able to send them out on a January night at 10 o'clock or 8 o'clock when you close? I mean, this is, if this is a need on top of the services that we have in Hastings, then it should be taken care of. And it should be in a zone that is a properly zoned district, because it would be a level of service that is, so I still don't know, is this a service center, or is this a gathering place, a museum? It just doesn't add up. It's confusing anyway for us. So we would like a lot more clarity and a lot more specific, sorry, I'm not gonna be able to pronounce that, though it is really dry. But this is just too wide-ended, too open-ended, and we have not gotten good, clear information. Thank you.
Thank you. Council, any other, Councilmember Fulch?
Your Honor, I'm gonna ask Mr. Flugel for a little advice here. Would it be prudent to just table the issue so that we can actually get in writing what the business model is? I would recommend not allowing alcohol at the facility, and then limiting the hours of operation, from like 1 to 8 p.m. to have the least impact to the neighborhood, and then the number of people that could be within the facility, if we're talking about 150, and to really, get that in writing and have that formally agreed to before we take a vote on it or send it to a council committee for further conversation to nail down the detail. I'm just looking for a little advice, because I hate to shut the door on this, since Dean is being so willing to make accommodations and limit the use of the facility. I think his heart is in the right place, and he just needs, I think, Dean has a lot of vision, clearly, in the last several months that I've gotten to know you. I mean, you have a huge heart, and you got big visions, but you need some parameters, because I think Amy has points about that it should be, railed in, and that you're given some real specific guidance on, what's okay to do within the facility, and so that we can make everyone happy. I mean, I would love to see a win-win situation here where the facility, the funeral home is converted into primarily, a single-family residence, and is being used to support veterans within our community. And I think that would be an asset, to everyone. I think that we have to start looking at some of these issues not as being not in my backyard, to rather it's like, okay, well, how do we make this an asset to those in our community? And so with that, I'm looking for feedback here about sending it to one of the council committees, or just temporarily tabling it so that staff can work on it a little bit more. Maybe Julie, if you have thoughts about it.
Dan.
Councilmember, the body has the ability to table the matter if it deems that appropriate. I will say, and I can't speak for John specifically, but there has been a lot of effort by staff to try to define the uses that are being proposed here. And what you have in your packet, I think, is the best that staff could do to try to narrow down what the proposed uses are. I don't know if staff working with the applicant will be able to do any better than what you have here. It worked hard to try to get you at least the information and the definitions that you've been given.
Okay. Councilmember Liefeld?
There's someone who'd like to say something, Your Honor, I'm not sure.
Sure. You can come up and state your name and address, please.
I'm John Fry, and I live right across the street from the funeral home. I think you're being misled. The funeral home was a great place. They were nice people. When it snowed out, these guys would be out shoveling the sidewalks and helping neighbors. There was, what did you say, 140 celebrations of life there? These people came, spent an hour and a half, visited with one another about their loss of their mutual friend and loved one. It was bad at one point because a UPS truck couldn't get down the street with parking on both sides. And that's Ramsey, Sibley, and 7th Street. But that's irrelevant. Now this gentleman wants to bring in a group gathering home, have a weenie roast party, and then in the back lot play polka music until 9 o'clock at night or whatever. This is a family neighborhood. It's a quiet neighborhood. People watch out for one another. We don't have theft. We don't have anything going on. But now you're going to bring in this element that's quite not right. And sure, he's going to have catering in, and the next thing you know, it's like, hey, Harry, you got a pint in your back pocket? You got a little weed to smoke? You know, I'm an old man. I've been to more parties than you folks have even been to. But this facility, well, all of a sudden we'll have bands. And then the bands will be loud. You have kids at home trying to sleep. You're trying to sleep because you got to go to work in the morning. It doesn't lend itself to the neighborhood. Like he said, there's all kinds of vacant buildings and structures around here. That Ace Hardware strip mall has all kinds of vacant buildings. They can't convert one of them into a gathering place. All the military vets that I know that are disabled and Vietnam vets, they're proud. They want to be out in the public. They don't want to be hidden away. If this VFW and American Legion do so much for them, how come they don't use the facilities downtown? Why do you got to come out into the neighborhood where people are trying to cut their grass, have their own backyard barbecue? You want 150 people in your backyard? I don't.
Thank you for your comments. Anyone else? Yes.
Hi, my name is Michelle Wolf. I'm a neighbor. I know neighbors around, and some of you guys. This is the first time that, Dean, I'm impressed with you, what you want to do. My concern as a neighbor is his flexibility. That's a great thing. That's a lot of flexibility. That's a lot of flexibility. It is flexibility on the fly. And my concern is, even if you put certain parameters to that, you got a good heart, a big heart. I get it. What's that flexibility going to look like? We're confused. We're confused. I think Dean's confused. Okay, I run group homes, adults with disabilities, all this other stuff, and I also have a community center right behind the post office that is free to the public. Free art, free things like that. So And the VFW is a gathering place. There's lots of gathering places. I mean, I offer gathering places for free. And and also, is there money? Are you charging for things? That's kind of what I still don't even know. Is there a real business there? Because you can invite people into your home and let them have a meeting. You can invite people into your home and do lots of things. Is it a real business even? I'm very confused, and I think Dean's confused, and I think he's gonna stay confused, and I'm worried about the stability of the neighborhood with decisions on the fly. If there was someone who could, you know, say specifically what's really gonna happen, Dean isn't even able to say what's really gonna happen. I just don't trust necessarily, if there was a plan and Dean was making more sense to me, I would be behind that, definitely behind that. I know the needs of the neighborhood, and there are still some lacking things. That's not the way you get those things. You talk to people, you say, what are the needs? What are the resources? What else can we use? Is the church doing it? Is someone else doing it? And someone else is doing all those things, except for the museum, maybe. And you can do that in your home. So just a flat-out home might serve his purpose. I don't even know if there's a real business. I can't tell.
Thank you for your comment. Comments, yes?
Hi, my name is Mark Dombrowski, and I live at 121 East 6th Street on the corner of Sibley and 6th. So in the spirit of keeping it to things that are new, again, like I mentioned last week, I'm really impressed with Mr. Marcus and his mission. I'm not impressed with his communication, and I'm not impressed with his straightforwardness. Councilman Joe asked him, is that coming in weird? Should I just stand here? Okay.
Yeah.
So Councilman Joe asked him, was he interested in some other properties if this didn't work out? And he said no. But Amy said he went to her house in her yard to let her know that he was withdrawing. But yet here we are. On Saturday, on his Facebook page, he posted that he's withdrawing his offer to Katuria and that he's making an offer on Wise. But Councilman Joe asked him straight up front, any other properties? And he said no. So there's a lack of faith here. I don't trust him because what he writes in public on a public forum and what he says to you are two different things. So once you lose me, you've lost me. I would like to help him. There's all kinds of things that I do in my background that I help people on a daily basis in the business that I'm involved with regarding finances and budgeting and improving credit. And I'll bet you I could provide a lot of help to people that he likes to help. And I'm offering myself for him to do that. But I am not offering my neighborhood and that building, which, again, I agree with Mr. Starkman. We got to get somebody in there. It can't be a vacant building. Way too vague, way too vague, way too inconsistent that I don't want to table it. I mean, if there's something else that comes down the road, to me, like I said, once you lie to me, take that back. Once you lose me, you've lost me from an integrity standpoint. So that's what I got to say. Oh, and one last thing, and I could be wrong, but the mission, the proposal of what we want to do here doesn't fit in that type 2 housing or home occupation definition. I mean, yeah, if I'm running a small one customer at a time operation into that type 2 home occupant deal, but not when I have 150 people. Like Mr. Flugel said, this grandfathered in funeral home business after 1 year of vacancy, there is no grandfathered in. There is no nothing. There is no non-conformity thing. There's nothing that carries over. One last thing, promise. Again, talking about confusion. 1 minute, it's a nonprofit. The next minute, after our planning commission meeting last week, Mr. Marcuson said that he perhaps was going to go to Centerville, Wisconsin, and where he could pursue his dreams and his vision and his business. So my question is it a business or a nonprofit? Confused. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Liefeld?
Mr. Flegel, question. If we were to move forward with the recommendation to deny the special use, would Dean Murkison have the ability to reapply with better information on his application? I'm seeing all of the home occupation requirements, and I'm not seeing that his application meets those. So to Councilmember Fulch's point, I would prefer, instead of us tabling something, I would prefer that we deal with what's in front of us and let Mr. Murkison correct what needs to be corrected, get more information, give us better facts, and come back to the Planning Commission. Is that something we can do? Or that he can do?
Council member, with all else fails, actually look at the law, but I believe there's a 6-month period when he could not apply, and that's just what I'm going to look. So he could come back, certainly with a new application, but I am, sorry I have to look here, but I believe it is a 6-month period after a denial when it can't be resubmitted.
Your Honor, while the legal's checking that, I want to confirm if we do deny it and he wants to come back, he will have to pay the fees to apply for this permit again. So that's the other part, is he would have to reapply, and that includes fees.
A new application.
I have found it, Your Honor. Whenever a Type 2 application has been considered and denied by the City Council, a similar application for a license affecting substantially the same property and use shall not be considered again by the Planning Commission or City Council for at least 6 months from the date of the denial, unless a decision to reconsider the matter is made by not less than a 6 out of 7 vote of the City Council.
I'd like to make a motion.
Yes.
Mr. Flegel, for clear understanding of that, does that mean if we are denied this evening with the Markisons, a new prospective buyer for an R2 business is not allowed within the next 6 months?
Do you want me to answer that?
Sure.
I think a different applicant could propose a new application. I'd be pretty surprised if you're going to get another applicant that's going to come in and apply for this type of use.
But it's within the R2, so if it's a residential...
There could be another application for a Type 2 home occupation use, but not this type of occupation use within 6 months.
Just to clarify, because I heard something a little different, that it was on the property.
I tried to read it, so how it reads is how it reads. I don't know that, Your Honor, I'm not really comfortable getting into hypotheticals about what a potential property purchaser might do in the future. I don't think that's appropriate for this conversation. If the council wants me to give an opinion at some point in time, but we're here to talk about this application.
Right, I just was asking.
Not what might come in sometime in the future.
Sure, but the question was brought up. I was just asking clarification as you read that. Thank you.
Thank you. Lisa? Councilmember Liefeld?
I'd like to make a motion to accept the staff's recommendation to deny the rezoning of this property and to put in a reconsideration of this applicant with more specific data provided by the applicant.
Does it work? Yes.
Councilmember, the reconsideration that was referred to in the ordinance, that is something that would come later if there's a request by the applicant. So if the council member is inclined to make a motion to adopt the recommendations of the Planning Commission, I would also say that's denying the Type 2 home occupation permit. There was a mention of rezone in there, and that's not what we're dealing with here.
Okay, thank you for the clarification. So what you're stating is that at a later time, we could meet to discuss whether or not we would reconsider at a later date.
That's correct.
Thank you. I would like to make a motion then to adopt the recommendation of the city staff to deny the rezoning at this time. Planning Commission, excuse me.
think we'll take a roll call.
You need a second.
Second? Councilmember Brox?
Councilmember Vaughn?
Ready discussion, is that it for discussion?
We can have discussion, yes?
Affirm, and then the motion is to accept the planning commission. We're accepting the planning commission's denial of this. I vote yes.
Councilmember Fulch?
I vote no. I think we should have tabled it and reconsidered.
Councilmember Balsanic?
With reluctance, no.
Councilmember Brox? Yes. Councilmember Lund? Yes. Councilmember Liefeld? Yes. Mayor Fassbender?
No.
Four.
Your Honor, excuse me, I misspoke myself. With reluctance, yes. So I'd like to change my vote to yes.
So, 5-2.
5-2? It is a no. Okay. Do I have to say anything else to them? Okay. Tonight, we have a cost sharing and lease agreement with the school district. Julie?
Yes, Mayor and council members, tonight we're asking for approval of a cost-sharing and a lease agreement with Independent School District 200. In 2011, 2 agreements were created when the senior center was relocated to the Tilden Building and the school's alternative learning center was moved to 213 Ramsey Street. Both those agreements ended this month. So 213 Ramsey Street is owned by the city, and the lease agreement would have the school district paying $34,000 annually for the use of that building for an additional 7 years. And the Tilden Building needs upgrades, including a new roof, doors, tuck pointing, lighting, and maintenance. The school district is asking the city to continue to assist in funding these improvements at the same proportional share in relation to the space occupied by the senior center. So then the city would then pay $30,000 annually for the next 7 years for those improvements. Superintendent Collins was here, but he must have had to leave, so I can attempt to stand for any questions.
Thank you, Julie. Councilmember Vaughn?
Thank you, Your Honor. If I read that right, so the school district is looking for help from the city to continue our agreement because that building needs improvements, roof and so forth. With that, they also agree to lease our facility that we own down here at the ALC, down in Second. Or does our building need improvements? What, if we agree to this, is it as of today, or what happens 5 years into this agreement, the school's having session, all of a sudden the roof's leaking on them? Is it our commitment then to say, oh, we're going to pay for that roof because we own the building? Where we're actually saying, oh, we're going to help you with your building, but not this one? That's what I'm worried about. I'm not opposed to it because I think we've been doing it. I was hoping Mr. Councilor Collins, I just want to make sure that we're not going to get caught in year 5 saying, hey, it's your building, fix it, because it's leaking. That's not written in that agreement.
No, it's accurate, Councilmember Vaughn. That is not written into that agreement, and the city owns that building on Ramsey Street.
So we would pay for it. Okay.
Yeah.
Maybe I could comment. The lease on the Sibley Street building that the city owns, that lease generally requires that the city has to maintain the structure, which would include the roof, walls, not a whole lot more than that. It's a triple net lease, or it's a lease that has virtually all of the other maintenance and improvements paid for by the tenant. But yes, a roof redo would probably, I think, be the city's obligation on that property.
Councilmember Liefeld?
Thank you, Your Honor. Councilmember Vaughn, just in a thought, and anyone else who was at the meeting can please step in. My understanding when we spoke of this was the lease agreement is primarily their leasing amount is to cover these costs. It's basically a joint venture in which we're not making money. They payment of the lease for the building is what will cover the repairs of the roof and such that need to be done. That was the conversation that we had during the meeting, because I asked for clarification myself on, what are they paying for? Where's this where does this $30,000 go? Go ahead.
But, Your Honor, just to confirm, we are also leasing, they're asking us first to help them fix a community building that's owned by the school district. So it's not like we have these dollars coming in to set over here. We're using these dollars to pay for that upgrade that they're asking us to fix their roof on that facility. At Tilton.
Councilmember Fulch.
Your Honor, I'd like to make a motion to approve the cost-sharing agreement and lease agreement with the Independent School District number 200. They've been an excellent partner for the past 8 years, I think the first agreement was, and it seems like it's a really beneficial community partnership, and I see no reason why we wouldn't continue with that agreement into the future. Thank you.
I have a second. Councilmember Brox. Council, any other discussion? Councilmember Vaughn.
Just want to clarify, I'm going to vote no on this because I think this agreement needs to protect us as a city on our facility because the school district is leasing from us, and I think our lease should have in there that, hey, if we have something with our bricks and mortar, just like we're helping you fix your bricks and mortar, it should be in there. So I wish that was in the agreement, and I wish the school district would agree to that because we are literally taking in dollars, but we are on the hook to help fix their facility. I agree, great partner, but it just was a technicality that I wish was in this lease agreement that they would have covered that part. Thank you.
Any other discussion, Council? Councilmember Leifeld.
Julie, are you able to answer whether or not we discussed improvements that had been made to the Ramsey Street building? Do we have any data on that? I know that was part of our meeting that night where we discussed this concern.
I don't have the specifics with me. I know that Superintendent Collins had talked about all the improvements that they had already done to the Ramsey Street, and I don't have that with me.
Okay.
I was hoping Tim would still be here.
Councilmember Lund, yep.
So if there were no, if it was a perfectly functioning building, the time is still up from the previous agreement. So we're sitting in front of an opportunity to either part ways with this agreement or renew it effectively. The dollar amount is merely our portion of the usage of the building, not the entire maintenance of or repair of the building either. So I guess the question is, if there was no maintenance to be done at all, would you then not be okay with, not you, but would we not be okay with effectively a net zero transaction is what this is? So I don't know if tying it to the repair is necessarily the only way to look at it, if that makes sense. So it seems like that's a major hangup. Kind of, yes.
I mean, a simple amendment that says, just someone look at that building to tell us we might need a new roof in 8 years. If someone could tell me that, I'd feel more comfortable. I'd be agreeing to it because the roofing company would say, you're good. You're going to be good for 8 years. But we didn't get that before what we're voting on today. Now, if we have an amendment that says that we'll get the roof checked, with this agreement goes forward with it, that the roof gets checked in the building, sure, it's a good agreement.
Can we make
Okay,
that a priority?
Council. Okay. Can we, Dan?
well, back up. Can you define a little bit better what you're proposing?
Again, we can vote on this. I'm not opposed to that. I just wish that this agreement would have had our facility checked, and it didn't. And is the school willing to help us on fixing our infrastructure like we're doing with theirs? So the request I'm having is, I'm fine with this agreement going forward with the amendment that we get our facility checked for any other updates that needs to be done. Now, if somebody comes back and says, hey, that roof might not make it 8 years, that agreement's coming back in front of us. That's what I'm looking for, is I want us to check that roof or check that building before I agree to, year 5, we're gonna be in front of us and we're gonna see a bill that comes through saying, part of the agreement, fix the roof.
Councilmember Brox.
So my question is, when the school did their facilities assessment, was the Tilden building a part of that? And is that how we determined that these things needed to be done for Tilden? So they did their due diligence on that building. So I think what you're saying, if I'm understanding you correctly, is that we should be doing our own due diligence on our building before we sign a new 8-year agreement. I would agree with that.
Okay. So there is a motion. Councilmember Liefeld.
It's unfortunate that our school administrator isn't here. But in the meeting, so what?
Joint powers?
No, it wasn't a joint powers meeting. Who was in attendance? Julie, do you recall?
Was it just recently?
Yes.
No, it was just a workshop. We were all there.
Where we talked about the funding. So maybe Melanie, is there any information that you would have regarding the costs, where these numbers came from? Because I know we had some discussion specifically about what needed to be done at Tilden, what had been done on Ramsey. Do you have any information? Not to put you on the spot, but it was the budget meeting. Thank you. Yeah. Okay.
I don't have any information with me tonight.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Fulge, did you want to speak? Okay.
So what I heard Councilmember Vaughn say is that he supports moving forward with the vote, or do you want to have an amendment? Because I heard two things. I heard the idea of having an amendment, and Mr. Flugel had said that I would have to allow a friendly amendment, and I'm more than willing to allow an amendment to my original motion. If Councilmember Vaughn would like to make one, yes or no?
I recommend calling the vote.
Okay, he said he'd call the vote.
Motion to call the vote.
Okay.
Okay.
That takes 5 votes to call the vote.
Okay.
I mean, if no one has an objection, Your Honor, it sounds like you can just proceed with the vote without a separate motion to call the vote.
Okay. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay, motion prevails. Okay, next we will have a presentation, the 2020 tax levy. Julie?
Oh, Council, I'll be really brief. Tonight, we're asked to pass 2 resolutions, one to approve the preliminary 2020 city property tax levy and budget and set the date for the truth in taxation hearing as Monday, December 2nd, and then also approve a separate resolution for the 2020 HEDRA HRA special tax levy, and Melanie will do a brief presentation.
Good evening, Mayor and council members.
Thank you, Melanie.
Thank you. We've saved the best for last tonight. All the financial information everybody's excited about. So I'll get right into it. The 2020 preliminary budget. We started with our market value estimate from Dakota County, and it is going up about 7.16%. The increase in our property values are kind of all over the place depending on the property classification. Our residential single-family homes went up about 7.6% on average. Townhomes were about 7.9%. Condos had the biggest increase, just shy of 10%. Commercial industrial small was around 3%. Large commercial was 2.4, and our 1 million plus buildings were a little over 1%. Apartment buildings averaged about 2.5 to 2.6, and vacant land remains unchanged. This is a fun little chart with a lot going on I put together to show everyone that we have our local tax capacity, which is the value of all the property in our city. That is the top bar. You can see that that's been steadily going up each year. The second bar is our historical tax rate, and that's been going down steadily with that one little blurb in 2016. And that last bar shows the historical levy, and that's been slightly increasing as well. So you've got an increase in the market tax capacity and an increase in the levy, but a decrease in the historical tax rate. So what does all that mean? We were given direction to lower the tax rate for 2020. So this preliminary levy that you see is about a 3.9% increase, but that translates into a 1.5% decrease in the tax rate. And that's because we're raising the levy less than the increase in our property values. So the tax rate will go down. I put a few numbers down there to kind of show you historically over the last few years. You can see that levy amount and the tax rates. The tax rate is projected to be around 58.15%, give or take. Once the county refines that, it won't be exact, but it'll be close to that. And you can also see the dollar amounts that it's been going up over the years, along with the percentage of increase year to year. So there's a lot going on that slide. So when you look at it holistically, total revenues, we are anticipating $33 million. The majority of that is from our property taxes. Right after that, we have our charges for services. That's our fees, our fines, utility fees, all that type of stuff. We have bond proceeds are 9%, and that is typically, it can go up or down. It depends on the size of our street projects and any large capital improvements that the council chooses to do. Interest and other was at 6%. Local government aid is at 4%, and intergovernmental revenues, which would be like our grants and things, is about 2%. So our expenditures preliminarily is projected to be about $33.6 million, which is a little bit higher than that revenue stream. And a lot of that comes from our debt service funds. We're going to use some fund balance to make some of those debt payments. So our top spender, as always, is public safety. Right behind that is public works, and then our general government debt service, which is all those bond payments, and then culture and recreation at 10%. So a few things that we have in the preliminary budget, body camera upgrades. There's a lot of economic development initiatives. There's upgrades to Vets Park. We're going to remount an ambulance. There's LED lighting upgrades, upgrades to the Hastings Family Aquatic Center, and we're going to reconstruct and seal coat some park trails. So what does this mean ultimately? When we're looking at the impact on the homeowner, it's all over the board because it depends on each individual property and what's happening with its valuation from the county. So on the left, I've put some home values. I started with $199,000. If a resident's home is worth $199,000 and has no market value increase, their tax from this year to next year will actually go down by $33, and that's reflecting that lower tax rate. If their home increases by the average value, what we're seeing from the county at that 7.6%, you can see that their taxes will go up about $70 next year total from this proposed preliminary levy. And the other property amounts I have on there is the 245 home, which would decrease with no value by 34. 7.6% increase, the tax would go up by $84. And then another tier of home ownership level, 345, their taxes will go down by $50 if their home value stays the same. If their home value increases by 7.6%, they would have an increase in their city taxes of $116 next year. So with the budget process, we talked about utility rates, so I just wanted to bring that up so everybody can see what we discussed. Staff is proposing the following increases. Water rates, we're proposing about 5%, and we ran some figures with the average household use of about 15,000 gallons per quarter. So you can see a 5% water rate increase translates into an 86-cent increase in the base charge for a quarter and a 5-cent per 1,000-gallon charge. So that's about 75 cents for the water gallons and 86 cents for the charge. That's just looking at your average typical household. And the reason that is being proposed to go up is because we are paying for that water line portion of the street reconstruction project in 2020. The sewer rate, we're going to propose a 3% increase. That translates into a 54-cent base fee increase and about a 13-cent increase per 1,000 gallons. The reason we are requesting that is Met Council raised our rates by 11%, which is about $138,000 next year more. We also have that street reconstruction project going on. And for stormwater, we're proposing a 3% increase, which is about 56 cents. We're using that for rain gardens and stormwater management. And I also put a little bit in here about the Minnesota test fee. This fee is not in our control. It is mandated by the state, and the state is increasing it by 84 cents. So it's basically a pass-through that our residents get on their bill that we then have to submit to the state of Minnesota. So with all those little increases factored in, average about $550 per quarter on their utility bill is what they will be seeing. And we also have it budgeted to take a holistic look at the structure to kind of see, we're going to have 2 years of data with our new rate tables to kind of take a look at, you know, if it's making sense, if it's generating the revenue, if it's lining up with our CIP where it's at, make sure it still makes sense. So with that, you have 2 resolutions in your packet. The first one sets the preliminary levy, sets the preliminary budget, and it sets the date for the Truth in Taxation hearing on December 2nd, 2019 at 7 p.m. And the second resolution is a request to set the HEDRA special tax levy. So after, hopefully you pass those tonight, and after that happens, the next steps will be anybody that wants to see the preliminary information, we'll put everything out on the website, including we'll start working on getting the budget book together with all the detailed information. We'll have our Truth in Taxation hearing in December, and then on the second December meeting, we'll ask you to pass the final levy for the city and for HEDRA. Were there any questions? I went kind of fast.
Thank you, Melanie.
Thank you.
Council, any questions? Okay, I'll accept a motion to accept the first the budget, the preliminary budget. A motion to, okay, Councilmember Fulch and Councilmember Vaughn. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. Second, I'll need a motion to accept the resolution to approve the proposed 2020 HEDRA. Councilmember Vaughn, Councilmember Fulch. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Thank you, Melanie, for all your hard work.
Thank you.
And your staff. Thank you. Council, do you have any announcements? Councilmember Leifeld.
Thank you, Your Honor. I have a couple announcements tonight. This Saturday, and I hope I'm not stealing your thunder, I'm super excited that I'm going to be participating again in the citywide cleanup. I don't know how many of you heard what a great time I had at the last event, but I got myself a little motorcycle out of the deal. Haven't tried to make it run yet. It's still sitting in my garage, but we'll talk about that another time. So this Saturday, they're doing a fall event. So that's out at the Hastings City Public Works building just off of Progress Drive. If you have any specifics, you can go to the city's website, as well as there's a Facebook page as well under Citywide Cleanup. Secondly, next Thursday, I will be attending an event at the Hastings Public House, formerly the golf course here in town, and it is called Women Inspiring Women. And it's designed to bring women leaders together through the community to network and support each other. So there too is a Facebook page for that. All are invited. That's from 4 to 6 next Thursday, September 26th. And then one final one, and I might have these backwards, whereas there was a really important one that I want to talk about. Friday, September 27th, there's a free event going on down at the Levy Park Pavilion from 7 to 9 p.m. It's the first annual Dragging on the River. It's a fundraiser to help support the Trevor Project. Anyone who's not familiar with the Trevor Project, please Google it. It's a wonderful organization, help to keep our youth happy, successful, and healthy. If anyone has any questions, that too has a Facebook page, and I'd love to see you at all of these events. There's so much going on around Hastings in the next few weeks. And just today, so Mayor, you may not have this, Thursday, October 3rd at 7:30 a.m. in the community room here at City Hall, Public Safety Committee will be having a discussion on Tobacco 21. And that committee consists of myself, Councilmember Fulch, and Councilmember Baraks. So I look forward to having that discussion. Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you. Council, I have a few. Heritage Preservation Commission will meet on Tuesday, September 17th at 7 p.m. Public Safety Advisory Commission will meet this Thursday, the 19th at 6:30 p.m. Planning Commission will meet on Monday, September 23rd at 7 p.m. HEDRA will conduct a special meeting on Thursday, September 26th at 6 p.m. Happy birthday to Councilmember Brox. Our next council meeting is Monday, October 7th. Prior to the council meeting, we will have a welcome reception for our new city administrator, Dan Whitaker. So stop by before, and that council meeting starts at 7. Thank you. I need a motion to adjourn, please.
Motion to adjourn.
Councilmember Vaughn and Councilmember Fulch. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.